Greetings, everyone. This is Larry Hansen, Chief Marketing Officer for Conference Direct, and thank you for joining us for our third episode of CD Live. So we have kind of an interesting take on today's episode. We recently produced our annual partner meeting, which became a hybrid meeting. So we wanted to share with you some of the best practices and feedback on that. So joining us today is my partner, Adam Briggs, who will be co-hosting this with us. And then the two individuals that are responsible for planning our annual partner meeting. First is Mary Quigg, who's our VP of Global Accounts and plans our internal events also for Conference Direct. And then JJ Wills, who's our SVP of Marketing Programs and Business Development, who oversees all of our events. So welcome, Adam, Mary, and JJ.
Thanks, Larry.
So we'll go ahead and get started. So JJ, the first question is going to be for you. And I know a lot of this, but why don't you talk to us a little bit about what was your biggest challenge on producing this hybrid event and how you kind of overcame that?
I would say the biggest challenge, hybrid is hard. I'll start with that. Hybrid is hard. But it's also a great stepping stone in getting back to having in-person events. And really, I think the biggest challenge is that you're approaching it, you're planning two events. You're planning a full virtual event and you're planning a full in-person event. And then you're trying to integrate them and find ways to make them collaborative. So you're looking for where you can overlap education and networking and engagement. And, one thing that was kind of forced us to play with our agenda was the fact that we're not all in the same time zone. That's a whole new experience. Some of our people were in Las Vegas, but then we had attendees across the US and Canada and even overseas and Europe. So that was a new challenge for us to tackle as well.
Great. Mary, any feedback from you on planning your first hybrid event?
I agree wholeheartedly. Hybrid is hard. And we had a steep learning curve because we hadn't really gone are the days where you used to be able to call a hybrid meeting because you propped a camera up in the back of the room and you live streamed it and you called that a hybrid meeting. That's not what a hybrid truly is and will not be that way going forward.
Great.
So, Mary, in addition to the labor lessons learned, budgets are tight for everybody these days. And I think we all agree hybrid is more expensive. Have you come up with any good best practices or suggestions for how somebody can execute a hybrid while still keeping with reasonable budget?
One of my, and I think we did this at ours, is realizing that live streaming every single room may not be anywhere close to within anyone's budget right now because of all that goes into it. Camera operators, sound equipment, coders, because you have to get that out there. So think about where you will deliver the content that is most important for everyone to receive, and maybe it's your general session room, and live stream that room, make that the hybrid room, and in content that's important for everyone to get. That's where I would focus my time and attention, as opposed to trying to stream out and make every breakout room content that would be viewed by all that are viewing virtually. So my opinion is concentrate on one room and only do it in that one room. And we did it that way. We knew we found that it was the best avenue for getting content out to everyone that was participating. But then some of the other rooms that had smaller meetings, we did not make that a hybrid component of the program.
And Mary, if we had just taped the session, would that have been less expensive than doing the virtual where it's live, do you think?
Yes, to a certain extent, but then you have to, it's not a hybrid meeting. If you ask me, at that point, it just becomes on-demand content later that you deliver in a different format later on. To me, a hybrid meeting means just what JJ said earlier, that we are planning 2 meetings that are happening at the same time, and you're trying to engage both audiences almost with each other. So you're not just focusing all your attention on the in-person attendee or all your attention on the attendee that's watching virtually. You really want to marry both stakeholders and make sure that they feel like they are they're actually attending a meeting together, and that they're being able to collaborate, network.
Yeah, Mary, it's a great point. And I actually experienced that. I was one of the virtual attendees, as you know, and I think we had our, breakout session where we had the group of people, in the round table. And as a remote attendee, I did find it harder to follow along. So I think that's one of those sessions where you almost do want to break it out, where you have one dedicated session for in-person and then one dedicated session for virtual attendees as a way to, more effectively have that collaboration. I think you're right.
Great. So we know there's various challenges to creating a hybrid event, but I think one of the unique opportunities is how you approach a trade show. So JJ, talk to us about how you were able to both marry the in-person with the virtual people in the trade show.
Sure. So traditionally, we've had a free-flowing trade show where everyone just wandered the floor. And so we changed to an appointment-based trade show, which allowed us to incorporate both types of attendees. So all of the appointments were set on our virtual platform in advance. And so the live attendees used that platform to make their appointments, and they met face-to-face, and that was great. The virtual attendees used the same platform, made their appointments, and they met all virtually. And then the part that got a little tricky was we also had the option where someone who was in person could be meeting with someone who was virtual. And we used the platform to facilitate that. So I would say the lesson learned there was that it was a little tricky to be able to see if that person was identified as in person versus virtual. So that was a lesson learned sort of on how we could set things up better going forward to make that easy and at a glance. But it actually worked really well. And we set up extra tables in our trade show that were like workstations. So if someone in person needed a desk to go sit down, turn on their laptop and log in to do a virtual appointment, they had a place to go and do that.
And JJ, I know you survey people, but what was the feedback from the attendees on the trade show?
They really liked having the preset appointments. And the element of knowing who you're going to meet with and being able to prepare for those in advance, I think was really beneficial.
Great.
Excellent. So kind of JJ, sticking with you, I know that this was a bit of a rush for this year's hybrid meeting, but having gone through it, do you have any considerations you would recommend people include in an RFP? So if you have, benefit of time in more planning, what are some of the must-haves, do you think, in terms of an RFP process?
Well, it's obviously 2 distinct RFPs. It's an in-person meeting RFP for a hotel or a convention center or a venue, and then it's a totally separate RFP for a virtual event. So you're managing those both, separately, but thinking through what are the integration points and how are you going to deliver content, and what content is going to be live streamed, like what Mary was talking about. I think that'll be an important part of the RFP process for your venue. And then I think also we really need to dive into the AV bid much more so than we would have during the RFP process traditionally, and understanding what the capabilities are, what the infrastructure is, and what the costs are going to be, because that will impact the overall event design. And then on the virtual side, I think in looking at that platform, understanding how they can facilitate a trade show, and also understanding the networking functions and how you can network both on the platform and then again, integrating those virtual attendees and in-person attendees and what the different options are to do that. And then thinking about registration for both. And so, looking at a registration system that's going to be able to facilitate registration for both types of attendees is important.
Mary, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, I think JJ's comments were pretty comprehensive. The one thing I would add is you are now, before you send out an IRFP, if you're thinking it's going to be hybrid, bandwidth considerations and cost are absolute must to include. You can't leave it up to chance because it's going to take a lot of bandwidth. And you're wherever you go, the venue, the hotel, the convention center, they all have to be able to, the infrastructure has to be there. Our hybrid meeting was at a brand new facility with amazing infrastructure from an internet bandwidth perspective. Some of the older properties may not have that already built in.
Great. Along those lines, Mary, when you talk about the bandwidth is dedicated, right? You don't want, other events or the attendees bogging down your live stream.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, we know one of the biggest challenges facing virtual attendees is how you keep them engaged. So, Mary, talk to us about some things you did and JJ did that helped keep our virtual attendees engaged through that conference.
I thought one of the most, it went not only engagement, but also in our wellness. It kind of married well with each other in that we had a leaderboard walkathon, and it lasted it started, I guess, the day before, 2 days before the actual in-person program went. And we ended up having both a virtual winner and an in-person winner. So, and the leaderboard showed on the app. And it was kind of fun. People talked to each other. During our awards ceremony, I thought it was wonderful to see how many people who weren't present physically were congratulating the winners in the chat function. And it was, the chat feature was blowing up, and that was just so nice. It was very heartfelt, and everybody could see it. So they felt a part of it.
Yeah, I can tell you, as one of the virtual attendees, they were having a lot of fun in the chat feature.
They were.
And I thought another great piece that I would encourage any planner is, whenever possible, is have the reverse camera. As a virtual attendee, I can tell you that it was really impactful after some of the breaks, seeing people come back into the room. So I thought that was a really nice touch you guys put in place too.
JJ, any feedback from you on the engagement aspect?
Yeah, a couple of things. We used the chat feature in the virtual platform for all Q&A for all speakers. So the virtual attendees were posting their questions in the same place where the in-person attendees were also putting their questions. And then we had one person who monitored that and then would review the questions and share them with the speakers. So it was a way for everyone to be using the platform together and collaborating together. And then we also did some just fun chat rooms. We knew that the virtual attendees were going to be missing out on some of the social aspect. So we gave them their own chat rooms each morning. And one was, let's talk about business. And then one was, let's keep it casual. We assigned a moderator for each room. So there was someone to help kind of get things going and keep it going. And we had 20 or 30 people in each room each morning that just wanted to be online for an extra hour and chat, which was great.
Great.
Fantastic. And so JJ, I know that, a big part of events is speaker management. And I think all speakers are getting used to, presenting virtually. Another unique tweak with hybrid, what are some of the strengths and weaknesses to how you approach the pre-recording for speakers for the event?
So I think that
Hey, JJ, we lost your audio for a sec.
oh.
This is why it's good to pre-record.
Bingo.
Put a big message, pre-record.
How risk averse are you?
That's funny. Okay, well, I'll start over. So there's definitely some benefits to pre-recording. Being able to have stable Wi-Fi, check their audio and video, have control over all of that in advance is really beneficial, I think, for pre-recording. You also can review the content in advance, and it allows for more flexibility with schedules. So as a speaker that you want might not be available on a specific event date, but perhaps they could pre-record within your 2-week window. And so it does give you a lot of more control and flexibility. I would say a downside is that you record probably 2 weeks before the event actually takes place and the session's going to be streamed. And so, things can change, and that's something to think about. Is there election results coming out between when you recorded and when you're going to play it? Or is there a major holiday or some other kind of major event to take into consideration? When we've done pre-recording, we've coached our speakers on trying not to use references to time. So not to say, today is, or this week this is happening, or last week something happened, because it just makes it that much more obvious that it was pre-recorded. And then also with the pre-records that we've done a live Q&A following them, so that there's still engagement with the audience. And I feel like that's kind of the best of both worlds, of having that polished control element in advance as well as the engagement.
As a follow-up to that for JJ and Mary, for the events that you've managed, have you found it challenging to keep speakers on track? Because, we all know the speakers, and I'm guilty of this, that are working on their deck the day before, right? You can't do that if you're pre-recording. You've pushed up their timeline 2 to 3 weeks. Has that been a challenge at all?
I'd say a little bit, and just getting them to wrap their mind around it and keeping to remind them that, okay, I know this event's on December 1st, but we're recording on November 15th. So here's your deadline and here's why. I think it takes more reminders.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually, and building in time for any post-production editing is important. I think we have a tendency to feel like we can just record on a Zoom link in front of our laptop, and that's going to give you achieve the look that you want it to achieve. But if you want a good production quality piece for your program, you may need to pre-record, but then there's going to be an AV production company on the back end that takes that raw footage and actually does the editing and the background image, all of that needs to be then added in afterwards. So it takes time.
Yeah. So Mary, you mentioned the awards dinner. What are some things that, as a planner, you feel people should consider when doing an awards dinner?
And a dinner is the operative word. Remember, if you're feeding those people that are in front of you, those folks that are at home or in their offices aren't having that same meal. And therefore, the program is going to take on a very different look and feel for that segment. We tried to keep the consistency of how our program runs year after year. And we definitely, I'd say it was a lesson learned from me that I forgot that the experience for that in-person attendee was going to be different. And they didn't need to be sitting there while we all ate our meal and they had their computer up and there was nothing. So it was, especially the East Coast folks. I mean, Adam, it ended very late, didn't it? So I would probably restructure the run of show so that the awards possibly happened all at the front end and then dinner was served after.
Great. JJ, any feedback on your side on the awards piece?
Not only about awards, but just in general, especially, when you're taking an existing event and then trying to make it hybrid, there's things, you can't do everything the same way. And we approached it from, we wanted to keep it as consistent as possible. But I think you really need to look at it as a separate event. And if you have the flexibility and the freedom to be creating it from scratch, that's even better. And it really will help you with your event design versus trying to fit a traditional event into this new model and mold.
Yeah,
great.
No, that's great. And JJ and Mary, thank you so much for your time. I guess just in closing, what's that one takeaway you want to make sure, someone listening in takes to heart, after today's discussion here?
I'd say be purposeful in planning a hybrid meeting. Don't think that you can do an in-person meeting and that everything you do there can just be broadcast out. Be very mindful that you have two distinct audiences and the staff resources to make sure that both audiences are served well.
And piggybacking on that, I would say, we all were used to what in-person events were. And over the last 9 months, we've gotten used to what virtual events are. And a hybrid event is a whole nother type of an event. It's not an in-person event and it's not a virtual event. It truly is its own type of event. And so thinking about it from that perspective and from the attendees' perspective, I think some of our virtual attendees had a little FOMO because they weren't there. And that's a whole nother way of thinking about virtual and what their experience is like. And really just thinking about it from the attendee experience all the way through.
Excellent. One final question, actually, because you just brought something up, JJ, I think is important, is we've been approaching hybrid as a way to kind of bridge the gap between, COVID virtual and in person. Do you get the sense that people would be using hybrid even beyond that as a way to create that FOMO from people that may be on the fence that attend virtually first and then realize what they're missing out on to attend in person? Do you see that as happening?
I think you could do that from a marketing perspective. It could have some value. You'd have to analyze the ROI and how many more registrations can you convert, because it is expensive, as we all know, to add that virtual component. So figuring out, what would your registration conversion need to be to make it worthwhile. I think that we've learned some great new tools and skills during the virtual events, and we'll just have to analyze where it makes sense to apply them in the future.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you again, JJ and Mary, for sharing your feedback. And for all of our listeners, remind you that this is on our YouTube site, and we'll also be putting it on our social media sites. But thank you again to everyone, and please look forward to upcoming CD Live episodes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.